All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Mia Tepich,
My name is Mandy Morello.
and we are student representatives for UNICEF here at the University of Michigan.
For World Health Day 2021, UNICEF UM is conducting a week-long initiative to raise awareness for global childhood malnutrition and start a conversation about the realities of childhood malnutrition and the implications on children around the globe.
Today, we are sitting down with Dr. Neil Seethaler, a former U.S. Air Force general pediatrician, current fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and a pediatrician for Heritage Medical Services. Dr. Seethaler, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't we start with defining a key term in this conversation, malnutrition. Dr. Seethaler, could you help us understand what malnutrition is and why it's different from hunger?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some people may not really consider malnutrition as a disease like many other diseases, but it's a disease. It has symptoms, and if it goes untreated, it can lead to complications as well too. Like many diseases, it is curable, and there is a treatment for it. And if you catch it early enough, there will be no ill consequences. And if there's enough resources, then it's actually totally 100% preventable, which you can't say for a lot of diseases out there. So it's definitely something worth putting a lot of energy into, but it does impact a lot of people. The general term malnutrition generally also encompasses not just undernutrition or deficiency of things, but also over overnutrition, which includes things like obesity. But when most people think of malnutrition, that's what they think of as undernutrition or lack of energy or not getting enough nutrients. So now, as far as the difference between malnutrition and hunger, I think of hunger as sort of basically the signs that your body is giving you to tell you that I'm missing energy or I'm missing certain nutrients. And then malnutrition, I guess I would say, is kind of more the consequence or the state of health that occurs when you don't get adequate nutrition or the nutrients that you need.
And I guess you're right. People don't really realize how widespread of an issue child malnutrition really is. UNICEF estimates that nearly 195 million children are malnourished worldwide. So, in your experience, would you say child malnutrition is also a prevalent issue in the United States as well?
It is, and it's obviously not as recognized as it is in underdeveloped countries, but in a developed country like the U.S., it definitely exists. It's kind of a silent disease that people aren't aware of, and I think it's probably people have become more aware of it actually during this past year with the pandemic, as the number of people who have been affected is really been quite astronomical, and it's very surprising when you think you live in the United States, or the wealthiest country in the world, but we do have it is a problem that we have here.
What would you say then are the leading causes of malnutrition and what specific groups would be most at risk for it?
Well, I think it sort of depends on what part of the world you're talking about. And I think in underdeveloped countries, uh, causes of malnutrition include shortages of food or difficulty just obtaining food and poverty. And then and one thing that can complicate malnutrition in underdeveloped countries is even if you have adequate food, diseases like infectious diseases can definitely impact even if you have adequate food. Um, how well it is utilized, and malnutrition can still be a problem there. In a developed country like the United States, I mean, poverty exists here, and I would say poverty and lack of access and difficulty obtaining foods are probably the main things that affect that are causes in the United States. People don't think of this too, and this probably doesn't impact as many people, but certain diets that people follow, whether it be faddish diets, avoiding dairy or avoiding gluten, things like that, can, depending on how extreme they're taking, can also lead to malnutrition as well too. So
One of the most common symptoms of malnutrition in children is stunting. Could you explain what stunting really is? Is there another medical term for it? And what are some other symptoms of malnutrition in children?
yeah, it's funny. Stunting is in my training. It wasn't really something I came across a lot, but in preparing for this, I know the World Health Organization as it uses it as a definition. It's kind of equivalent to failure to thrive, but it actually goes a little further. So stunting can be uh, is actually the lack of physical growth of children, but it can be more than just physical. It can be intellectually and developmentally and neurological as well too. Um, the and the scary things about it is stunting generally in kids, because kids are still developing and they're more vulnerable. Stunting implies that there are some irreversible changes that occur with it. So that's one thing that's super important about battling malnutrition is some people think that, well, once we identify kids, we can just feed them appropriately and they're fine. But if you identify them too late, there can be stunting, which is irreversible growth failure, irreversible neurological development that just can't be fixed, um, but it's equivalent to sort of saying failure to thrive, or for the most part, that's what most people think of it as a growth failure.
So this is obviously a very upsetting conversation, but a necessary one. And it almost seems like when looking at the bigger picture, tackling the poverty crisis is a near impossible task. According to the United Nations, we aren't on track to meet the second Sustainable Development Goal, which is end hunger to achieve zero hunger by 2030. Climate change, COVID-related economic downturns, and military conflicts have now left over 690 million people suffering from, quote, acute hunger alone. From your experiences as a pediatrician and from your time in the medical field, how can we best approach this crisis? How can we help malnourished children?
Well, again, I am just a general pediatrician. I don't have as much experience with, working on the front lines in underdeveloped countries, but I do think it's obvious that one of the major problems is access to food, you know, and recognition of which areas of the country and the world don't have access, and then dealing with poverty as well too, because even if there's access for plenty of food, if people just don't have money, they're not going to be able to afford it. And like you had mentioned, there's a lot of conflicts in the world where food is available and people have the money, but because they're displaced, because they're refugees, they can't get the food that way as well. So I think it's more of increasing access, doing what we can to deal with poverty in the world and eliminate poverty. But then also education, so that even the US, I think that's particularly important, is that people don't think of it as a problem, but if caretakers are educated and made aware of the problems and the consequences of nutrition, they can make adequate choices and avoid things like stunting or irreversible developmental problems that can occur.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Seethaler, for joining us today. We appreciate your insight and value your perspectives. At UNICEF UM, we know that one of the most vital ways to promote change is through education, like you said.
For the
Great.
rest of our week-long World Health Day initiative, we'll be sharing resources on media platforms to build upon what Dr. Seethaler told us, and provide you further information about how we can work to reduce poverty and nourish children.
We hope you follow along and tune into our panel on Wednesday, April 7th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time.
Thank you.